Imagine an entire world hidden beneath the canopy, where nations still live beyond maps, uncontacted peoples who have survived centuries of invasion, plague, and silence. But today, their final refuge, the Amazon, is under siege. I'm Arturo, and this is Latin Lore from Latin America's history to mysteries and true crime to local legends, whispering Latin intrigue. Every tale is triple verified in archives before it reaches your headphones. Hit subscribe. Fresh revelations drop every week, ready for your next campfire debate. Listen closely, mi gente, because this story doesn't begin in the Andes or on a plaza where the marimba plays. It starts with a hush, the kind that falls over the rainforest before a storm, when the leaves hold their breath and even the river seems to slow its pulse. That hush is where the world forgets to look. That hush is where entire nations have chosen to remain unseen. Some of you heard the name North Sentinel Island back in 2018, when a man from far away rowed across forbidden water and did not return. Newspapers feasted on the shock, influencers filmed their warnings for clicks, and the world learned a word, uncontacted, as if it were a curiosity rather than a choice. But here is a truth you don't hear enough. If you want to understand uncontacted peoples, don't look to that island at the edge of the Indian Ocean. Look to the beating green heart of our continent. Around the world, there are about 196 uncontacted indigenous groups, and an astonishing 95% live not on far islands, but in the Amazon rainforest of Latin America, our rivers, our canopy, our shared sky. Brazil alone shelters the most significant number, well over 100 distinct groups, while others live across Peru, Colombia, Bolivia, Venezuela, Ecuador, and in the dry forests of the Paraguayan and Bolivian Chaco. Their names are whispered in border posts and in the memories of neighboring peoples, Piripkura, Pirititi, Mashco-Piro, Awa, Yanomami subgroups who avoid contact, Ayoreo, Totobiegosode across the Chaco's thorny sea. They do not belong to the past. They are our contemporaries, our neighbors, and yet they have chosen an ancient privilege. Uncontacted does not mean ignorant or untouched by time. It means refusal, an act of sovereignty as sharp as obsidian and as old as the first canoe. Many know the outside world all too well. Some have relatives who were taken or lured out by missions or by hunger. Have learned to read our approach the way jaguars read wind. The smell of diesel mingled with cedar, the sing of distant chainsaws, the glint of metal on a riverbank. In Brazil, the Macaco were known for years not by faces but by signs, their light steps on hunting trails, their fires, their booby traps tipped with rodents' teeth to warn off trespassers. Uncontacted Pirititi have sometimes glimpsed their contacted Kinja neighbors and retreated like vapor into the understory. In Indonesia, the Honggana Manyawa have kin who left the forest under pressure. But to speak of them today is only to underline the lesson. They did not fail to contact us. They chose not to. Why refuse? Our elders will tell you that memory is a river. It curves and returns and does not forget. The memory these people carry is full of fever and steel. Contact in our part of the world often arrived on horseback and then by boat and then by road, and it came with epidemics that move faster than any drumbeat. Measles, flu, smallpox, ghosts you cannot see until they are already at your throat. An Awa elder in Brazil once put it plainly, in the forest, he had a good life. When he meets his uncontacted relatives, he tells them, stay. There is nothing outside for you. A Yanomami leader says the same in different words. The ones you call isolated are in their home by choice. They hunt. They gather acai and bacaba. They are not starving. Who then is civilized? The people who insist on entering another's house or the people who bar the door against harm? Here is the other truth that gets buried under headlines. When left alone, uncontacted peoples thrive. Many are nomadic, following the logic of seasons and spirits across their territories, moving camps so the forest can breathe behind them. They fish the Blackwater creeks and hunt along sandy riverbanks. They build light shelters or great communal houses, malokas, whose roofs hold stories like constellations. Their botany is a library without shelves, resins for fire, fibers for baskets, roots for fevers, seeds for tomorrow. Their territories are not only larders or pharmacies, they are memory maps. The land is language, and the language is law. No place on earth concentrates this reality like the labyrinth of headwaters where Brazil meets Peru, the Javari Tapiche region, and just across the Brazilian line, the Vale do Javari. This is a realm of oxbow lakes bright as mirrors and river islands that migrate overnight. There, by the count of those who study from afar and listen from near, live dozens of uncontacted groups, the world's greatest concentration, some 26 in the broader Javari Tapiche mosaic alone. Think on that. Entire nations threading between the roots of Samauma giants, slipping through corridors of Heliconia, speaking to one another in languages the rest of us will never hear because they do not owe us their words. And yet the world keeps knocking. We tell this story from Latin America, so we must be honest about our region's scars. The Chaco Chaco knows the taste of pursuit. For decades, evangelical missions and ranchers in Paraguay organized manhunts that captured and sometimes killed Ayoreo people. Survivors were forced into settlements where disease moved like fire in dry grass. In western Brazil, when a modern road slashed across Nambiquara territory, almost the entire population staggered under the weight of sickness. In Peru, oil exploration, followed by logging, opened the forest to outsiders. The Nahua were pushed into contact and then into funerals. At least half were gone within a few years. These were not accidents at the margins. They were systems of extraction wearing the cheap masks of salvation and progress. If you need a single image to carry our collective guilt, remember the man of Tanaru, the Indio do Buraco, the loneliest citizen of the Brazilian state of Rondônia. He was called the man of the hole because he dug deep pits inside and beside his straw houses. Nobody knows whether for ceremony, for hunting, or simply because grief needed a place to sleep. Loggers and ranchers had erased his people over decades. For years he lived alone, refusing contact, moving in silence like a shadow of the original forest. In 2022, they found him in his hammock, face painted with urucum red, as if he had prepared for one last visit. He died as he lived, sovereign, uncontacted, an indictment written in the language of absence. We cannot say we weren't warned. International law, hard won by indigenous movements from Patagonia to the Caribbean, recognizes collective land rights and the principle of free, prior, and informed consent. If consent cannot be freely given, no project is legitimate. Brazil has, on paper, embraced a no-contact policy that says the most responsible thing a state can do is to secure a people's territory and then step back. Across the region, constitutions and courts have sharpened the same idea. The law does not ask for pity, it demands respect. But the pressure is relentless, porque la codicia no duerme. Greed doesn't sleep. Advocates who track the numbers warn that more than 9 out of 10 uncontacted groups face threats from resource extraction. In and around their territories, logging advances like termites in a beam. Researchers count over 100 uncontacted groups whose survival is directly menaced by timber mafias and their legal cousins. Gold fever rips up riverbeds across the Amazon, poisoning fish and people with mercury. In Yanomami country, illegal mining has brought disease, malnutrition, and a hunger that should never exist in a forest so abundant. In South America, Indonesia, and West Papua, the lands of roughly 2 in 5 uncontacted groups are being invaded for minerals. Gold, nickel, the shiny components of someone else's green future. Oil and gas concessions stalk the same forests. A seismic line is just another word for a trail of ghosts. Meanwhile, agribusiness is clear with an appetite that never feels full. In the Chaco, the world's fastest deforesting dry forest, the Ayoreo Totobiegosode wake at dawn to the mechanical roar of bulldozers. In parts of the Amazon, cattle and soy erase the tree line like a tide that forgets to ebb. And where there is money, there are guns. At least a third of uncontacted groups in the Amazon live under the shadow of drug trafficking routes that slice through protected areas. Missionaries, yes, still, after everything, target about 1 in 6 uncontacted groups, breaking laws, dodging patrols, and calling it love. Then there are the modern conquistadores of vanity, adventure tourists, and content creators who treat other people's homes as a backdrop. Every year, some trespass where silence has pleaded for space and call their trespass a video. So why, you ask, why don't governments stop it? Some do try, and many of our countries carry within them a fierce movement of indigenous guardians who refuse to give up. In Brazil, the Guajajara Guardians patrol the forest with GPS units, machetes, and courage, risking their lives to protect the territory of uncontacted Awa. In Peru, Yin families leave gardens at the edge of their villages, manioc, plantains, papayas, so the uncontacted Mashcopiro can take food without fear, a quiet covenant between neighbors. Across Colombia, Guardias Indigenas stand on roads with their staffs of authority, saying no to anyone who would cross without consent. Even far from our continent, the Nicobarizi speak up for the rights of their uncontacted neighbors, the Shompen, because indigenous solidarity knows no ocean. These actions are not charity. They are defense, rooted in the knowledge that a people's survival strengthens everyone's future. Still, the contradictions are sharp. Some governments sign treaties with one hand, and with the other grant concessions that bite into indigenous land. National interest is the euphemism that empties maps. Dams, highways, rails, each presented as the price of modernity, and each, if pushed through uncontacted territories, a death sentence. We in Latin America are not naive about the need for development or the urgency of dignified work. But development that requires the erasure of a nation is not development. It is amnesia with a budget. Let us return to the forest for a moment, to the place where this story lives. Imagine the Javari at dusk, river still like a blade laid flat, Far upstream, smoke rises from a hidden camp. A child follows a line of footprints, a mother's, a brother's, across a sandbar into a tangle of palms. A snare waits on a trail, its tip sharpened with a rodent's tooth. This is a message. In another camp, a healer grinds bark into medicine while the elders remember how the world began, which clay to use for paint, which fish schools mean the river is changing. There is fear always when motor noise carries on the wind, but there is also a fierce, elegant normality. They are not lost. They are precisely where they intend to be. From our side of the forest edge, what is to be done? First, we must agree on the most straightforward truth. No means no. The no-contact principle is not neglected. It is consent made visible as distance. Governments must demarcate indigenous territories fully and defend them as if defending embassies, because that is what they are, sovereign homelands. Patrols need fuel and food, not just signatures. Health systems and contact zones must be ready with vaccines and protocols for when contact happens by accident, because accidents do happen and the cost of delay can be measured in gray. Courts must treat the invader and his employer with the same seriousness. Illegal mining is organized crime, not a quaint frontier hustle. Missionaries who attempt contact in defiance of the law are not saints. They are endangering lives and cultures and must be kept out. Second, the industry must clean its hands. Supply chains are stories too, and the story you buy should not end with a village coughing. Companies that cannot guarantee that their timber, gold, nickel, beef, or oil do not come from uncontacted territories should be told. In court, in markets, and in the quiet pressure of consumers, that their era is over. Our region has pioneered legal ideas that the world now cites. We can pioneer clean economies that don't bulldoze memory. Third, we, ordinary people in cities far from the river, must learn a new kind of pride. Latin America is more than its flag colors and stadium songs. It is also the discipline to step back from what is not ours. It is the humility to say que no todo está para la vitrina. Celebrate indigenous literature, protect indigenous journalists, and fund indigenous patrols. Share the news that absence can be an achievement. When politicians seek to weaken protections, answer them not with folklore, but with the quiet, stubborn insistence that the forest is our shared inheritance, and that its first peoples are not mascots for environmentalists, but sovereign nations with their own futures. I know, some will ask, but how can we be certain they are well? The question says more about us than about them. We are the ones who built a world that cannot imagine thriving without visibility and validation. Out there, beyond the last spur road, thriving is a protein-rich stream and a garden of wild fruits. It is a language breathed between kin and kept far from the ambush of cameras. Does risk exist? Of course. Hunger, accidents, intergroup conflict, dangers that have visited humanity since our first fire. But the significant existential threats to uncontacted peoples today do not spring from their way of life. They arrive from ours. If some groups stand at the edge of survival, it is because we keep shoving the edge toward them. And still, porque así somos. We carry hope like a talisman. Hope sits in the canoes of the Guajajara guardians, in the gardens left by Yin hands, in the verdicts of judges who remember that law without memory is merely paperwork. Hope breathes in the Vale de Javari when monitoring posts spot an illegal plane and the authorities actually come. Hope rides with the community radio signals that warn of loggers and with the student who learns to say free, prior, and informed consent as easily as Abuela said, Buenas noches. If defenders hold the line, if we, from city hall to corner store, refuse the seductions of dirty supply chains, then the future does not have to be a dirge. So listen again to that hush. It is not emptiness. It is a complete silence, the kind practiced in ceremonies, a silence with rules. Beyond it, uncontacted peoples live in the present, chiseling arrows, painting faces, telling creation stories under roofs that sound like rain when the night birds sing. Their refusal is not a rejection of us as humans. It is a refusal of a system that has already taken too much. Philosophers write that truth is perspectival, and in our lands, perspective is born of rivers and ancestry. From our perspective, from a Latin America that remembers its wrongs and insists on its future, the truth is this: they have chosen, and that choice is not ours to annul. If we are honest, we know how this story should end. Not with a dramatic first contact, a museum exhibit, or a viral video, but with an intact forest and a closed door. Not with our voices filling their clearings, but with their laughter unanswered by microphones. We will still feel their presence the way anyone feels a neighbor behind a wall. Footsteps, a faint melody, the scent of smoking fish drifting on the evening breeze. And that will be enough, because it means people still move beneath the leaves. The rainforest does not ask for applause. It asks for respect, the kind that keeps its distance. In that distance, entire nations will continue to choose to be exactly where they are, and we will finally prove ourselves worthy neighbors. Latin America, strong, resilient, and stubborn in our defense of life. In the hush before the storm, we will be the ones who do not break the branches. In the storm itself, we will be the ones who hold the line. Muchas gracias. Thanks for trekking the hidden trails of Latin America with me. If tonight's story unsettled you, subscribe and ring the bell, because Latin America's darkest stories are far from over.